Hello everyone, Sableye here and welcome back to the channel. Today we need to talk about one of the biggest issues hindering competitive Pokemon as of right now. With the new season fast approaching, guys, it is time to discuss the player capacity, more specifically the very small player capacities and the, I don't want to say poor registration process, but the definitely very ineffective player registration process. So quickly, for those of you who do not know, I'm going to be speaking strictly from the VGC side points. If you guys are playing the card game or Pokemon Go, I'm not sure if this relates to you at all, but if it does, it probably does in some extent because I believe all the registration systems are run through Arcanine Labs. But I'm going to be speaking strictly from a VGC standpoint because that's what I know, that's what I can relate to, and that's what I've experienced firsthand. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the registration process, it is currently a very poor lottery system that's not really a lottery system. So it's basically they announced the registration saying, hey, it's going to go up at, let's just say 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, for example. And at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, you've got to be ready to go. You've got to go register for the event. And the first number of whatever people get in, and it normally fills up in crazy amounts of time. It's already affected the 2024 season. We've had Pittsburgh sell out in 20 minutes. We've had Peoria sell out in, I think it was like 12 or 13 minutes. And I know Barcelona, I don't know the timing on this, but it also sold out incredibly fast. Now, guys, there's very obvious reasons as to why this is bad, right? And I probably don't have to sit here and explain it in a video, but we're going to go over it anyways. And we're also going to talk about like some other like bigger issues that may not be as obvious as well, and maybe talk about maybe some ways to potentially fix this moving forward, if they even can, because frankly, I'm not certain if I can come up with an answer on how to fix this. But either way, main reasons it's bad, guys, is this is very limiting to the growth of the game. Okay, the demand for this game is far greater than it ever has been in the past. Back when I started playing, I remember registering for regionals, and we were just talking, like I would be at a local in like 2 months before the regional happened. Let's just say Toronto regionals, for example, and we were just talking, we're like, oh, you're gonna register for Toronto? Yeah, I'm probably going. I just want to finalize some things, and registration would go up in like that week, right? And you could register like all the way up till like right before the event closed, and it was never full. It was never at capacity unless there was like a really hype regional, or like the first regional, like something major would have had to be at that regional for it to hit capacity. It was very unlikely. I'm not sure if it even ever did, right? But now we have so many more players, whether it's because now we're on the Nintendo Switch, whether it's because more players are getting into VGC, whatever the reason, we have this greater demand for the game. It's no longer being met, and regionals are filling up far too fast. Now, this is discouraging, right? Before, it used to be a couple months before, like maybe you're not on Twitter, right? And let's just say registration is tomorrow at 7, right? You're not on Twitter, or you haven't been on Twitter, and you just happen to go on Twitter on the Wednesday now. And now you look and you're like, oh, I wanted to register for Pittsburgh. Let's go see if I can look into doing that. Well, you're done. It's not even 24 hours past the registration when it opened, and you can no longer register. Guys, that is incredibly discouraging, okay? Especially if you are, like, I don't want to say like don't have the let's just go with don't have the resources to get to too many events, right? All of a sudden, it is very stressful for you to get into the 1 or 2 events that you can actually go try to get into. Like for us, we have Toronto regionals this year, right? And that is considered my hometown regional. Imagine not getting into your hometown regional because you just didn't click a button fast enough for registration at the time it came out. It's insane. And that brings me, kind of flows into my next point. What if you're not available at that time? Right? Like, what if you're just not available? It's absolutely insane to me that you have to be available at that exact time, right? Because it doesn't last even like 2 hours. If it lasted a few hours, I could kind of see it being okay. It would be at least a little bit more like understandable. But it's lasting 20 minutes, not even, right? And all of a sudden, okay, well, I was, at work at that time. Well, I'm sorry, I can't get to a regional now. And generally speaking, a lot of these, at least the North American ones, tend to go up around the same time period. It's generally around 7 p.m. of the local time. So theoretically speaking, you could always be at work when these registrations go live, and you are just absolutely done for this registration. You are never registering for a regional. It's over. It's terrible. It cannot happen. Now, granted, another thing into this is maybe if they announced it far enough in advance, right? If they said, hey, we're going to announce it like 3 weeks in advance with every detail that they could go for, I mean, at least maybe you could try to plan something, right? Maybe you could plan, hey, you know what? I'll leave work early that day, which you don't really want to have to do for registration, but maybe, just maybe you could plan to not be driving home from work. You could wait at work, register on your phone, and then drive home, right? Something along those lines. Like maybe there's a little bit more leeway there, but they don't. We get these announcements 2 days before they go live sometimes, and it's absolutely insane, right? It just doesn't happen. I don't want to say transparency, but the transparency isn't there, for lack of a better term, okay? We don't know how many spots there are going to be before this registration goes up. We hardly know 3 to 4 days in advance. We're lucky if we get a week advance notice before registration goes up these days. It's absolutely insane. This needs to be fixed. And just a little more thing I think that Pokemon should maybe consider here is this is also potentially hurting viewership of these events as well. Now, granted, this is a little bit more of an out there concept, and I don't think it's as strong of a point or that big of a reasoning, but it's definitely something to take note of, because let's just say like a player with like a massive fan base like Wolf, or a more recent player, Justin Tang, who had a great breakout season last year, right? Let's just say one or both of them don't get in, or players with similar storylines don't get in. These are massive storylines that the casual fan base loves to follow along with. If you've ever been on a Twitch stream watching a Pokemon live stream of a competition, it's always, where is Wolf, where is Justin Tang, where are these storied players, because they have stories attached to them, right? The casual fan base loves that. And if they're not getting into events, like I know Justin Tang missed out on Pittsburgh already this season, right? Now, obviously, I don't think it's like, obviously it's worse for the actual player. Like if you're not getting in, you're getting in, it sucks. But this is definitely a side effect that I don't think is being talked about either. That is definitely a reason maybe Pokemon might want to try and go in and step in and fix this. I think it's a little bit out there, but I did want to mention it because I think it's a really interesting point that doesn't get really talked about, right? These storyline players not getting in, all of a sudden, well, what's the point of me watching this stream now? And that kind of hurts viewership a little. Obviously, one person at the end of the day, not a big deal. But at the same time, you're still taking away potential strong players from tournament play as well, which is even more insane, right? There's so many lines to that. I could go on forever about that. I'm gonna move over here to what I think is the real slap in the face, and the real reason I think it really needs to be addressed now more than ever is they've lowered the amount of players that need to enter the tournament in order for players to earn championship points. For example, last season, in order for the top 256 from a tournament to earn championship points, we needed to have 800 players register for that tournament, or to show up on day one of that tournament, right? They have drastically lowered that number. So now in order to earn top 256 championship points from a regional, you only need to have 512 players show up, which is honestly, you are paying out half of the turnout roughly gets championship points, which is incredible. I don't want to say it really fixes bubbling, but it definitely helps ease the mind, right? Because before, and this has happened numerous times, you could go 6-3, right? 6-3 would get you into potentially top 64 if your tiebreakers were good. If your tiebreakers were good enough, but you could also miss points entirely and get 134th and get nothing, right? And that is absolutely horrible. So what they did, they said, you know what, we're going to lower the requirements to earn CP at these events, and you're going to now have 512. So now you might not get, obviously you're still going to bubble, right? It's almost impossible to fix this bubbling in the circuit that they have currently. You're still going to bubble, but it's not going to feel as bad because you're not going to go the same record as someone who got 50 points and get nothing. You're going to go the same record and got 50 as someone who got 50, but you're going to get 30 out of it. So it's not that bad anymore, right? And personally, if you miss out on the 5 and 4, like 5 and 4 top 256, if you bubble out of that, personally, I wouldn't feel too bad myself, because for me, if I go 5-4, I'm not happy with that result. 6-3 happens, right? You could easily lose your winning in. You could have had a little bit of a rough matchup here and there. Obviously, 5-4 is not a bad result, but if I'm gonna miss CP at 5-4, it doesn't feel as bad as missing championship points off of something like a 6-3 record, which is just absolutely heartbreaking because you're realistically one win away from advancing to day 2 and potentially planning to win the tournament. Instead, you're coming out of there with nothing off of 1 loss. And in a game like Pokemon, that's crazy. But where I'm going with this is these events are capping at 300 to 400 people. They said, hey, we're going to give you guys championship points for events that are only need 512 people. Ha! Joke's on you. We're not going to let the events hit 512 people. It's just a slap in the face, okay? It is just an absolute slap in the face. I think it's poor logic, poor planning. I don't know what the scenario is. I don't know what it's like behind the scenes, but this needs to be fixed, okay? We need to talk about this because I think organizers need more stands, and I don't know if that's because Pokemon's not giving them more stands, if they're not recommending more stands. Like Overload Events, currently in charge of Pittsburgh Regionals right now, they are trying to open up more slots for us to go, but they just don't have the stands to go. Now, is this the main problem? Is this why things are capping from a VGC side point? Is this why things are capping? Do these stands where you plug your Switch in every round just not exist? But sure, they exist. We had 700 people at Orlando. So why are these regionals, why are these organizers not having access to these docks? Is it because Pokemon won't give them to them until the demand is too high? But we've seen the demand is high, right? This needs to be fixed moving forward. I obviously, like I said, I don't know if it's Pokemon not giving them. I don't know if it's the organizers not realizing that the demand is so high for VGC these days and they're not renting enough. Because I do know that's the case. You do have to rent them from the Pokemon company. But regardless, these stands need to be more available. Something needs to happen here. So this begs the question, can this be fixed? And I've seen a lot of talk on Twitter about different ways to fix this. And something I definitely want to bring up is a few of these options, because I could sit here and talk about how this needs to be fixed, but if I don't discuss different ways to potentially fix this, the video kind of goes nowhere, right? It's just kind of me ranting for, at this point, 12 minutes. But I think a few options. Number one could be to have separate tournaments for different games. Now, I do not like this option. I saw it on Twitter, but does it fix a problem? Maybe. Does it fix the, oh, we only have so many slots for VGC, we only have so many slots for TCG because we have other games that also need to have people participating in here as well, right? Now, if we don't have the 700 VGC players one regional, can 700 more trading card game players go? Sure, but there's flaws to this, right? It's not very practical. You are now asking, maybe you group like Go and TCG and maybe like Unite and VGC, like something like that, right? So you have all the electronic stuff one way, something like that. Like, so let's say you run 2 separate events on 2 separate weekends for, let's just say, Pittsburgh Regionals, for example. You are now renting out a convention center twice, and that's a lot of money. It is not cheap to rent out a convention center. It is not cheap to rent out a space to play. So would this drive up entry fees? I think it would, because now you have to expect these organizers to actually pay for the convention center twice. Now, surely that's not coming out of their wallet. That's going to come out of yours when you register for the event. And then that's going to lower registration numbers because the registration prices are going high. And then all of a sudden you're not going to need 2 events and it's just going to be terrible. I don't think this works. It works in a, I think it works like, I don't think in a, I think in a vacuum is the wrong word, but for lack of a better term, it works in theory, works kind of like in a vacuum, like in an ideal scenario, this would work. But I don't think it works in theory. The other option is maybe you stagger the entry times. And I know they do this for the international challenges. They'll say one day and they'll have like 3 time slots throughout the day. You can register wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. And that works. It solves the problem. Maybe you were busy at the registration time because chances are at some point throughout the day you're going to be available for one of those waves, right? That kind of works. But what that doesn't solve is the cap. It doesn't solve the cap at all. It does kind of solve the, hey, I wasn't available. It's okay. It happens. I'll just get the next wave. That solves that in a way. But it definitely does not solve the limit to the players. The number of players you have is 400. It doesn't solve that. Something needs to be done there. The game is ready to grow, guys. It really, really is. Now, can you do bigger what if you went bigger venues? So in an ideal world, maybe you rent out a larger space of the convention center, right? You always see, oh, this event is in Hall B and Hall C. What if you could rent out Hall A, B, and C? Obviously, it fixes some of the problems of the spacing issues, perhaps. It also allows you to, once again, just fit more people and potentially have a nicer event in general, because you can fit more people, more spacious, not as crowded, right? Like Worlds was crowded, right? But that was going to happen. That's besides the point. That's not the issue we're discussing here, right? This also drives up registration costs to rent out an entire another hall of a convention center, right? The registration costs have done nothing but constantly go up since I started playing this game. I remember when I started playing this game, I could register for a regional at $20. And I know some of my friends, when I first started playing, some of my friends, they were saying, wow, $20 is interesting because I used to register for a regional, it was free, right? And now all of a sudden, I believe the Pittsburgh regionals was $73 US, which is kind of insane. Obviously, I'm not here to talk about the registration prices, but they keep going up and up and up. If the organizers now have to rent bigger venues, it's just going to make them more expensive, right? Something needs to be done here, but I don't think either of these three suggestions actually help. I think the staggered entry times and releasing registration in waves, I think instead of doing it like one day, I think you do 2 waves on one day and then 2 waves like a week, like 3-4 days after that, maybe do 6 waves or something like that, right? Because I do think that helps in an extent of the whole, oh my gosh, I have to be on at this time and I have to go now. I think that part helps that part. But something needs to be done. We need to either have more space in the venues. We need to somehow find a way to get more of these stands for VGC competitive, right? Like, the game is ready to grow, guys, okay? There's always talk about, are we an esport, are we not? I don't think we're anywhere near an esport. I don't know if we're ever going to become an esport. I think there's a lot of problems outside of just this in general that are stopping us from becoming an esport. But we're not even giving it a chance anymore. Like, at this point, the company has said, we don't care. You guys are only going to get 400 people regionals, and the game is ready to grow. Okay? And it's not being allowed to. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this needs to be fixed. And the game is ready for it to be fixed, but they're not fixing it. Now, obviously, it's easier said than done. Like, I just listed a whole bunch of potential options, and none of them actually work, right? So I don't want to say, like, maybe they are trying. I don't want to say they're not. Maybe they are trying in the background, because it's clearly not the easiest fix. I'd be curious to know if any of you guys actually have thoughts on maybe potential ideas to fix these issues moving forward. I'd definitely be curious to hear them in the comments down below. But with that, I think I've rambled on long enough, guys. The game is ready to grow. It's not being allowed to grow. These very, very small registration limits are absolutely decimating the scene right now. It's just super discouraging. And with that, I'm going to stop rambling. I'll catch all of you in a future video. Thank you so much for watching.